Corita found inspiration in the everyday. In her screen prints, she combined, distorted, and juxtaposed sources all around her to share ideas about faith, love, and justice. Corita was born Frances Kent in 1918. The Kent family moved to Hollywood when she was 5. At 18, she entered the Religious Order of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, taking the name Sister Mary Corita. In 1947, Corita began teaching in the art department at Immaculate Heart College, and she took up screen printing. Corita wanted her art to be accessible. She used this traditionally commercial medium to widely disseminate her work, and she played with the visual language of consumer and popular culture to reach a broad audience.
Screen printing in and of itself is a very democratic medium.
It was a way for her to create a large quantity of works, but even the content itself was very specifically about reaching a wider audience.
Her early work was figurative and religious in nature, with playful hints of where her art would go next. In 1962, she created Wonder Bread.
That piece in particular really stands out. A touch of pop art starts to peek through.
Pop art remained her signature style throughout the rest of the 60s.
They say we have no art. We do everything as well as we can. See, so that you don't have art off in a little niche someplace. You have no distinction between what is art and what is not art. You do everything as well as you can.
By 1964, Corita was head of the art department.
By that time, Immaculate Heart College had received a kind of reputation as being a very liberal and even experimental college.
Immaculate Heart College and her print studio became this mecca.
She hosted cultural luminaries like Charles Eames and Buckminster Fuller, who described his time in the art department as among the most fundamentally inspiring experiences of my life. She became one of LA's most important cultural figures and artists.
This is going to be a 2-hour looking session, and there really is enough to look at for 16 hours at least.
Her assignments were pretty notorious.
Her assignments always revolved around large quantities of production, and this, of course, would intimidate any student, but it was very deliberate.
Do 100 drawings, by tomorrow. And the students would groan and they would think, well, that's more than I can do. And then the next day they would show up with 100 drawings. And it was always part of this process of kind of deconstructing the way that we look.
Sometimes you can take the whole of the world in, and sometimes you need a small piece to take in.
Corita encouraged her students to engage with the world beyond the classroom, both artistically and socially. In 1964, the art department took over the school's annual Mary's Day celebration. Corita and her students transformed the tired event into a joyful happening, while also drawing attention to poverty and world hunger.
You see this kind of prototype for what is later California culture. When you think of the 1960s, flowers in your hair and a real social justice message.
In 1965, Corita made My People, her first overtly political piece. My People features the cover of the LA Times during the Watts Uprising and a quote from a priest who was active in the civil rights movement in Selma.
She knew even in this moment that the newspapers maybe weren't telling the entire story. I think the church didn't want her to necessarily incorporate that into her work, but I don't think she could ethically keep going without addressing what was happening around her.
In 1968, Corita was ready for a change and sought dispensation from her vows. She moved to Boston.
She goes on sabbatical during the summer and she decides not to come back. It's also within the same year that she creates this incredibly rich series. She calls it a set of heroes and sheroes. This is a moment when she's left the order, and I think it allows her to be a lot more open and liberal.
Her work evolved, influenced by living in a new environment, a secular life, and her battle with cancer.
Her work does change. It's a little more introspective. It's a little more informed by her watercolor practice.
She's still struggling with her cancer diagnosis, and her work becomes a little bit more somber, a little bit of a more pastel-y palette, a little more minimal.
Love is a recurring theme in her later work.
Love is a very common theme in Corita's work, and I think it always comes from a point of humanitarian love. What is our individual responsibility in the collective whole? And when she writes love, that's the type of love she means. It's much bigger than all of us.
She remained active in social causes until her death in 1986.
Corita's groundbreaking art, whether experienced 50 years ago or for the first time today, is powerfully relevant.
The Corita Art Center is the largest and most comprehensive archive of Corita's work. It preserves and promotes her art, teachings, and passion for social justice. In alignment with Corita's ideals, the Corita Art Center strives to meet people where they are. That means showing up in the community.
How do we serve our community? We've been focused a lot recently on our education for wellness and mental health and creativity.
The Corita Art Center also acts as a lending institution, oversees merchandising rights, produces public programming, and serves as a resource and archive for Corita scholars and fans.
We have such an incredible collection of archival material, including, correspondence, press clippings, but also this wonderful collection of over 18,000 35mm slides that we're currently working to have digitized. I'm really excited about placing Corita into the canon of contemporary art history, of pop art history. There's no denying that she deserves a place there.
We're learning more every day about her, and it's so heartening, and you're just scratching the surface, and I think there's so much more work to be done here in learning about her practice, her artwork, and what that means for future generations.